Welcome, writers. As you're working on your expository writing, make sure to include specific details, examples, definitions, and quotations. In this lesson, we'll learn how to do that. Let's first learn how to add specific details to our writing. In this example, and throughout this lesson, we are going to learn about preserving fish, so the skill of food preservation. And I can tell you right now that primitive and ancient methods include salting and drying, pickling, and smoking fish. But I bet you'd like to know many more specific details. After research, these are my notes on how to salt and dry fish. The salt draws out the moisture from the fish, so you want to use about a 1:5 ratio of salt to fish. And then these next bullet points here are really the instructions for how to do it. You'll want to layer the salt in the fish so that the fish is completely surrounded. Watch out for pests and weather that might damage it as you wait about 2 to 3 weeks, and cooler climates may take longer. After evaluating my notes, I realized I could add more details about salt since that's such an important part of this process. I've learned that flaky or large chunks of salt work the best, and that this could be made by evaporating sea salt. I also think I could describe more about the layering of salt in fish. And then it's an important idea that this will become liquid brine. So really this needs to be accomplished in a container or a pit. And in ancient times, you might line a pit with wood, straw, leaves, or skin. Let's use our specific notes to now draft a body paragraph. It starts with a topic sentence, of course. I want to introduce the idea of using this method to dry fish. So I first say, salting and then drying is a method that has worked well to preserve fish since primitive times. Next, I'm going to put my notes into full sentences, grouping ideas together, of course. So let's talk about the salt. The salt is used to draw out moisture from the fish. Coarse or flaky salt crystals work best. Use about a 1:5 ratio of salt to fish by weight. Layer the fish and salt in a pit lined with wood, straw, leaves, or skins. This will become a liquid brine, so weigh the fish down with something heavy like a clean rock. I realized that was an important detail I needed to include. Watch for animal pests and damage from the weather. After 2 to 3 weeks, the fish should be ready to be rinsed and dried in the sun, but it may take a little longer in cooler climates. Once the fish is dry and flaky, it is ready to be stored. Now let's learn and practice how to include definitions in an expository piece of writing. You will want to define words and terms that might be unfamiliar to your readers, or to make sure that you have the same definition of the word. Let's learn how to include definitions in an expository piece of writing. Let's use our next method of preserving fish, which is pickling, for this example. I could tell you that pickling has been a method of preserving fish for at least 2,000 years. The acetic acid in the vinegar is the active ingredient. But that might actually leave you with a lot of questions. We might wonder, what is pickling and what really is acetic acid or vinegar? Let's go ahead and build a paragraph defining those terms. After some research and looking in the dictionary to define some of these words and terms, I learned that pickling is done using acetic acid, and that wasn't a term familiar to me. I knew that vinegar was used, but this research taught me that acetic acid is the active ingredient in vinegar. So I'm going to go ahead and describe what pickling is and define these terms as we go so that the reader and myself have the same, or similar at least, understandings. So here's my topic sentence introducing this next way of preserving fish. Pickling has been a method of preserving fish for over 2,000 years. Now let's talk about what that means. Pickling is when acetic acid surrounds a food in a container. Acetic acid is a clear, colorless liquid that is the active ingredient in vinegar. Most vinegars have 5% acetic acid. Acetic acid is made naturally when fruit juice ferments. Fermentation occurs when yeast from the air consumes the sugars in the liquid. Now that we understand those terms, I can go on to explain how to pickle fish. We can make our writing even stronger by including quotations. This is the skill of including especially powerful phrases from your research notes. The first step is finding a great source. So we want to include quotations from powerful sources, sources that we can trust and that others hopefully trust as well. So I found a lot of different websites that talked about how to smoke and dry salmon and preserve it that way. But this one looked especially reliable because, as you see here, it's from the Smithsonian. And that is a very, very well-known and trustworthy institution. As I read this article, a few lines stood out to me, and I thought that I could quote them in my expository piece of writing to really show strong evidence of what I'm saying and that it's true, really. And so one thing that really stood out to me was that heat, smoking, and drying are the major form of preservation, and this is for the Northwest people indigenous to this land. And then the next quote that I thought would be important was the one I'm writing here, which is that ceremony, song, dance, and prayer bring back the salmon each year to spawn. And I thought that was a lovely, powerful line that I think I'm going to save for the introduction, which I'm not going to model in this lesson. However, you will want to make sure to include an introduction in your writing. Let's learn how to embed a direct quotation into our expository writing. Here's the quote I want to use. Heat, smoking, and drying are the major form of preservation. I really need to introduce this quote so that I say who I am talking about. So here is how I would like to craft a sentence with that. For Indigenous people in the Northwest, heat, smoking, and drying are the major form of preservation. Since this is a direct quotation and it's actually other people's words, not your own, you will need to cite your source. So here is my sentence so far. Notice that I've replaced the period at the end with a comma because next in parentheses will be my source. In that article, they were using words from Raina Green. She wrote these words here in her cookbook, which she published in 1991. So now I am giving her credit for her own words and making sure that I don't plagiarize. Let's practice crafting a paragraph, embedding that quotation within. So for a topic sentence, let's introduce this strategy. Smoking and drying fish is another way to preserve it. And to show that it's not just any way, but an important one throughout history, let's put our quote next. For Indigenous people in the Northwest, heat, smoking, and drying are the major form of preservation. Raina Green, 1991. Now we can go on to describe how to do this strategy. To smoke fish, lay it out on racks or hang over a smoldering fire. It can be out in the open or in an enclosed structure. The process can take several hours to several days depending on the amount of fish and smoke. Thanks so much, writers. I hope you've learned how to include specific details, definitions, and quotations in your expository writing. Don't forget to include examples as well. Really try to weave these different pieces, the details, examples, definitions, and quotations throughout your piece of writing. Each paragraph might include a little bit of each. All right, take care, and I very much look forward to seeing you soon. Best in your writing.